All right, live from New York City. Hi, Kerry. Good to meet you.
Great to meet you, Mark.
First, I got to give a shout out to Kat Donnelly, who wouldn't forgive me if I didn't give her the credit for this introduction. So she's told me wonderful things about you, and no pressure to keep up to this. So we're looking forward to learning a lot and getting to know you a little bit better here. And best place to start, I would say, is just if you could just introduce yourself and just tell a little bit about you before we go.
Sure. So I'm Kerry O'Neill, and I run a not-for-profit investment fund called Inclusive Prosperity Capital. And I've been in the clean energy space for about 10 or 12 years now. Made a switch out of a series of corporate jobs into something that I, really have felt aligned more with my mission and values and what I care deeply about, and was thrilled to ultimately have the opportunity to figure out how to do that, make a switch from, a corporate job into doing good.
Yeah, I love inclusive prosperity. Is a great term, and it's no doubt that Kat introduced us because there's a lot of alignment in, I think, how we think and what we do.
Yes.
In this sense, with Fifth Element Group.
And Kat was one of the, she was one of the first people I met back at early 2008 when I had left my previous job and was trying to figure out a way to work somewhere around, climate change and contributing to addressing climate change. And she and I met at an MIT energy conference. And, I fell in love with Kat immediately because, thought very, kind of aligned in our thinking in terms of thinking about systems change, but also at a very personal human level. And, we came from different backgrounds, but kind of met in that nexus of like, how do you change these really big systems that are causing problems in our world, but in a way that connects with human beings and communities and makes a difference in people's lives?
I could have actually placed Kat's face on you, and it would have been exactly the way she looks.
That's why we hit it off.
It's so
why we
cool.
Hit it off.
It's so cool. No, she's brilliant, I find, and really down to earth and superhuman, and so I'm glad she put us together. And the way I say it relates is, Fifth Element, our firm, was formed to to align brands with social impact, to so that they can take care of and get the best talent and so on. And before I get more into that was everybody talks. I talk about everybody's why, and sometimes we talk about, is it the what that comes first and then the why, or the why that comes first and then the what? But I want to know, so why do you do what you do? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think the most immediate answer is my kids and all the kids out there, then the next generation and the generations after that. Because that was what really forced me to kind of change what I was doing. And it was my oldest at that point. He was 11 back then. He got really into climate change, and together we learned about it together. And, I remember him saying, like, Mom, you don't love your job. Why aren't you working on this stuff? Because you love it. And I'm like, oh my God, my 11-year-old kid is like noticing that about me. What does that say, right? And I had the great fortune to work in a lot of different sectors and a lot of different types of jobs and accumulate some really great skills. And I realized, I can do something with all those. I can put those skills together and try to fashion a new career in a way that's really going to make a difference. And there's something about climate change. So this is back in 2007. I made the switch at the end of 2007. I just, back then I felt this urgency, like, why isn't this mainstream? Why isn't everybody talking about this? And this is the MIT, I went to MIT, I geeked out on the science and the engineering, and it was like, it made me angry. Like, why aren't we all focused on this, right? So I felt like, wow, I can do something, like I can contribute. And I think as much as it is, you know, the why is about the kids in the next generation, it's also for me personally feeling like I want to contribute in a positive way, and I can contribute, and I have skills. And so instead of using my skills for some extractive sort of company or industry, why not focus them and channel them and be part of building a new way of doing capitalism? Back then, there were other terms we used back then. Good capitalism. I don't know. I'd have to, you know, there are many, many terms, right, we've had over the years for like what the next iteration of capitalism might look like. But that was a big motivator as well. How do you use finance for good? How do you corral markets so that they're helping our communities and our world and our planet, right? And so those were parts of the why, feeling like I could contribute, wanting to make a difference, wanting to, you know, do something my kids could be proud of. And wow, I feel like, you know, lo these many years later, I feel like we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more that we need to do. So now the why is like, if not us, who is going to do it? I mean, we must, you know, engage in these problems. It's an existential threat for our world, right? And so many other kind of knock-on effects. So yeah, that's the why. I feel like I have to.
I love it. You're almost answering all my questions. Going to have to think of some new ones. But
or we could drill deeper.
No, that's great. Absolutely, that's great. Obviously, I love the name, you know, inclusive prosperity, and with respect to capitalism, there is a term now out called inclusive capitalism as well.
Yes, yeah.
Which I kind of like, because without getting into the whole political thing, you don't have to go totally, for lack of a better word, socialist, and you don't have to go totally extreme. We got to make money, money, money. You know, you can be where most people really want to be. Like you say, you can have both. And aligned with that, it's taken decades. We both know this because we talked about dating ourselves with the Brady Bunch before we got on this. It's taken decades to get to the point where leaders realize that their corporate brand aligned with social impact not only helps them get the best talent to come there now, like my kids, your kids, who will look at that if they go there or not, but it also is really good for business. And as you said, you've been involved in financial services, e-commerce, real estate, you know, obviously renewable energy, solar, all gambits of this. And there's a little bit of a push question, but what differentiates you as one of those leaders who care, not only now, but for the future?
So, how do you succinctly answer that? I think because whenever we're thinking about areas that we might go into, markets we might enter, products that we might develop, we're thinking about it holistically, not just in terms of, well, we're not for profit, so of course we're not profit oriented, but maybe the term is more social profit. Right? So social profits are not just about economic development, but economic development and good jobs is really important because that provides living wages for folks so that they can feed their families and house their families and get ahead and what have you. But thinking about the way in which we're approaching the business, is it good for our own staff? Is it good for the community? Is it good for the end customer? Is it good for our environment, the air quality, you know, all of these other things? So I think it's taking a holistic, humanistic approach. And maybe as much as holistic, let's talk about humanistic. In our world, financing clean energy for communities that otherwise might get left behind, low-income communities, distressed communities, communities of color. We're thinking about what's going on in those communities and what are the needs of the homes and the families in those communities. Are we going to bring a solution that's truly going to reduce the amount of money they're spending every year on energy? And that money is money that could be used for school supplies or medicine or food, you know, depending on, are there good jobs being created in the communities, right? So not only taking that holistic view, but thinking about the people that we're impacting. And I do think that that's a difference. Not everybody thinks that way. And so we at Inclusive Prosperity Capital, not just me, but our entire team really is thinking about the people that are impacted and better health that comes with cleaner energy and all of those things. So, I mean, I don't feel like I have all the answers. It's more an approach, that differentiates perhaps, and trying to have empathy for what are the day-to-day lives of the folks in the communities that we're trying to make a difference in. And most importantly, who can we partner with? Like, we can't parachute in and provide all the solutions. Who are the folks on the ground, the organizations that are reaching these families and the communities? How can we partner with them so they can be successful? So maybe it's more of like a servant leader sort of model of really how do we enable and empower local communities to address the issues that they've got, by bringing some solutions to bear and democratizing solutions. We're in nonprofit, but we're in finance. So a big thing for us is how are we democratizing solutions? So it's not just Wall Street that gets advantage of all this, great financing structures and what have you, but how do we make it available to everyday folks?
It's you segued into so many cool parts there. Number one is community. I was talking to someone else who talked about, you remember when communities were formed, when you had the town hall, then you had the thing around it where people engaged and got together, and then the homes and everything, and it was a community. That's how you built the community.
Right.
And then you talked about people's health. My grandparents, probably your grandparents, they would always say, and they worked so hard, but they would always say, with a little bit of a Kiev accent, they would say, as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing.
Right.
And
Right.
it wasn't a catchy line. It was a sincere line.
That's sincere. Yeah. Like, at least you've got your health. Right. Yeah. Almost like a reminder.
They totally. Well, and a reminder is a good idea because we forget. And even with what's going on right now, the question will be when it's finally over, whenever that is, will we have short memories? And I think what's happened, so this leads to my next point related to health. Technology has changed and keeps changing like at the steroid speeds, basically. We've had COVID, which is in one way, it's obviously impacted social and economic dramatically, and who knows for how long. But it's also been a little bit of an awakening, as you say, a time for reflection, what's important, et cetera. I'd like to get your sense of how you think this is all going to play out with how the future of work looks like, or doing business looks like, going ahead. Yeah.
Well, I hope it's an opportunity for us to take stock and make some changes. I greatly hope that that's the case. When I think about what we've seen, what distresses me is folks who are having to shelter in place at home in their homes that make them sick because the homes are old and leaky and moldy, and indoor air quality isn't good, and that exacerbates asthma. And they're, not well insulated homes, and therefore the energy use is going through the roof. And that's, really at a time when they can ill afford any extra cost is costing them more. And so I hope that one of the things that we learn from this is that we need to, take stock of the places that people live and the quality of the air that they breathe, and how that does impact their health and their resilience and their ability to withstand a virus like this novel coronavirus, and that we systemically address those issues, not just sweep it under the carpet and say, okay, we're going to go back to business as usual, because we have the solutions and we know the solutions. Do we have the will to put those solutions at play at the scale that's required? So I do truly hope that we do that. I think we've also learned that there are new ways that we can work together. We don't always have to be physically present, and that used to be a barrier. Like, I can't come see you, and therefore I'm not going to be able to get anything done. Well, that's actually, we're learning that's not necessarily true. So that's a little bit of a silver lining, right? Like, don't be afraid to, try to get something done in this other, like figure out how to build a relationship where you're not face to face. Not to say like, great to be face to face. So I welcome the day when we can do more of that as well, but that doesn't have to be the only way.
Well, it's funny you say that because before all this happened, people would talk about connectivity, and we're connected to a lot of people, but we're not really connected in the same way. And my aunt, who's 92 in Montreal, would always say it was so good when we were all together. I mean, I like the internet, but it was so good when we were all together. So, and then we lose it. And I think kind of what's happened, to your point, is we miss it, but it's forced us to actually use technology even better, as you exactly put it, to learn how to build a relationship this way, rather than just being connected type of deal.
That's right. I mean, it does require you to be intentional and to create some new rituals around things. So that's, definitely an important thing that we've all learned.
Yeah, and you talked about well-being. We're looking right now, I love your opinion on this, we're looking at how current and future business leaders who care, because we think a lot of this is going to come from leaders who care in business to make things happen. But they're going to have to play a role in ensuring the financial well-being as well as the physical and mental well-being of the people that work with them, and realize that it, again, referring to some of the things you said, that it is going to be to the benefit of their business, but it's also going to flow into what we just talked about, the community.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
So, while we're a not-for-profit, most of us come from the world of business. So we're a very business-oriented not-for-profit, and we're thinking about solutions at scale and how can we generate income that can be obviously plowed back into our mission so that we can scale up.
Sure.
And so, instead of bringing that kind of business, we brought the business thinking into a not-for-profit, thinking about some of these not-for-profit-y sort of, ways of working and bringing that into business. It's like, let's meet in the middle. It's, it's a new way of doing business. And I think some of it is, as leaders, giving permission to your staff to have a life outside of the office. It's like, you are a person. We recognize you're a person. So you have a life outside of the office, and providing people the flexibility to deal with their lives as well as their work. Because if they're able to do that, that de-stresses them, makes them more productive, and makes them more creative and innovative and engaged, right? And so that's, one way in which, leaders can change how they do things. And I do think that's going to translate into, new, better solutions. I would be remiss if I didn't say, though, I think there are still plenty of businesses who need to think about their diversity, because, diverse teams, not just gender diversity, but, racial, all kinds of income diversity. Those are the teams that have the most creative solutions, because they're bringing all these different viewpoints together and messing them up together, and then, coming up with solutions that really do, fit a variety of communities. And so maybe that's something for folks to work on as leaders as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And the diversity has to be followed by the inclusion to your name. Otherwise, as anywhere near as impactful as it should be. So I think you're right on the money. I was talking to a business guy recently who said something to the effect of, I really do care. And it came up when you said give them space. He said, I really do care, but the pressure I have to perform for the shareholders, the pressure I have for the quarterly results, the pressure I have for all that, it's almost like I don't have time to care. So I tell our company, just donate $10,000 and just do it. You can do that.
That's a cop-out, plain and simple. It's a cop-out. But a true issue with a shareholder-driven mentality, right? So, the Business Roundtable, everybody, 108, I don't know how many people, you would know how many people signed on to that, saying it's not only about shareholders. I mean, there are examples of public companies with shareholders who are, trying to change that mentality. It is hard though, right? It means that you've got to perhaps retrain your analysts who are covering you, right? Or, I mean, there are lots of considerations that, I don't at all take for, that are challenging, right? And so we shouldn't diminish those challenges. But it can be done if there's will and leadership at the top to do that. And it requires, I think, a lot of transparency and honesty about this is the path we're on, and this is why we're doing this, and this is why in the end it's going to be good for our shareholders. I don't think you just could flip a switch without telling a story around it. And telling a story is not right. Like creating a narrative that you're going to live and breathe and deliver on, and consistently, message around, right? It's got to be like your new, your new identity.
Well, and I think you're 1,000,000% right. And you're really you mentioned social profit before. You're really talking about creating value, and there is, let's call it economic or financial value, but there's also social value. And I think
other externalities, right? I mean, this is the problem with climate change, pricing in all the other externalities. I mean, for business, it's pricing in the other externalities, which include social profit, or social,
right.
and other considerations.
And how much stuff do you need to buy? How much stuff do we really need? It's part of the mindset too. So last question on talking to you, we can go on for 2 hours, but last question for this is piece of advice for the graduating class that unfortunately isn't getting their true graduation, but you can in sentences answer their question like, well, what now? What next?
Yeah. Well, I think, don't do the obvious. If you are passionate and mission driven and there's a cause or something that you believe in, or even just like you have this desire to make a difference and do good in the world, don't look for the obvious job. Look for, if there's a particular part of the country you want to live in, don't be afraid to look at the nonprofit sector or the B Corp sector or government as well. Or don't be afraid to really question the values of the organization that you're joining. You can ask really open-ended questions and get really, honest answers. And sometimes you may not be, loving what you're hearing, and probe on that. Because if you're hearing things that make you a little uncomfortable in an interview, then that may not be a great organizational cultural fit for you in terms of aligning with your values. I've had some experiences like that in my career, and it took me a couple of years to understand that I wasn't in line with my values. And so I guess my other piece of advice would be, if that happens to you, that's okay. No matter where you work, you have the opportunity to learn skills. And so learn those skills, take advantage of that, but listen to your heart. And if you need to make a move, that's okay. Make a move, and hopefully you'll get closer to kind of your end goal eventually. And, look at me at my age. I'm, now, in my 50s, and I felt like it took me 30 years to get to my dream job, but I have it. And it took a lot of intention to get there. So hopefully you can get there faster than me.
Well, you got there. That's great. So congratulations, and so delightful talking with you. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Thank you, Mark.